It goes without saying that this past year has been a really tough one for everyone. COVID-19 has taken its toll on our health, our school and work, and on our safety in ways that we never could have imagined. We had hoped that the vaccine would be the solution. But as we know, the human condition is still rife with inexplicable behavior. Like you, most days I feel frustrated. Some days I get scared. And once in a while, I experience a draining sense of fatigue. I have my moments. I do. Even my optimistic nature feels battered and torn. And this surprises me. I'm not used to feeling down. Fortunately, my wife and kids are usually enough to raise my spirits again. And of course, our synagogue community, with all the tremendous good that comes out of it, nourishes me. Like Rosh HaShanah morning, it renews me, and I need it. I look back on this past summer with a sense of longing, when the COVID numbers were low and a cautious optimism was in the air. While our kids were at camp, Marita and I decided that we wanted to reclaim some of what we had lost this past year. We wanted to see our friends. One night, we had dinner with David and Amanda Lower. He's the senior pastor at St. Luke's Presbyterian Church in Dunwoody. She teaches children at the Mount Vernon School. Most of the time when we get together, we laugh and talk about our kids and tell stories. But on this night, the conversation got serious, and it affected me. We talked about justice, how some people have it, while many others don't. For every 2 steps forward, we seem to take a step back. Hate and racial tension have been weaponized, and attempts for progress are challenged in every way imaginable. We talked about COVID, of course, but mostly how horrified we were that public health had been politicized to the point of self-destruction. We were doubtful, extremely doubtful, if anyone at all had the political will to set our nation straight, or the power to actually do so. Our bitterly divided America has become a cliché, locked in a cold civil war which threatens to boil over. And we talked about the environment. This was, for me, the most painful part of the conversation. Man-made conditions have finally erupted into record temperatures all over the world, with never-before-seen floods, a frequency of hurricane, and melting polar ice caps. Nations of the earth are slow to react when they bother to react at all. And the vast majority of humankind shrug their collective shoulders, feeling helpless, even as the clock continues to tick. What kind of world are we handing over to our children? My clergy friend asked me from across the table. What kind of life will they have? We began to search for solutions, grasping at every possible straw we could rationally think of. But each one was deemed highly unlikely or impossible against the intricate wall of intractable division. How could a people, a nation, a world who could not seem to agree on the most basic, self-evident facts hope to agree on any widespread, meaningful action? It would take a catastrophe, we decided, and nobody in their right mind would ever hope for that. Finally, out of reasonable options, we defaulted to, well, someone will step up, someone with clarity enough to cut through all the confusion and charisma enough to unite our country and the entire world. Sounds like, I shared with the pastor, knowing it was a loaded suggestion, what we need is a Messiah. And he agreed, only if. Someone to appear like Superman in the distance, to rush forward in the nick of time to save the proverbial day. What is the Jewish view on the Messiah? He asked me. I thought about it for a moment. It's complicated, I answered him, and it is. There's a lot of history and upheaval in the answer. But basically, I told him, in the progressive Jewish world, it can be summed up as, there is no Messiah, and you're it. There is no Messiah, and you are it. This line isn't my own, although I wish it were. It's the title of Rabbi Robert Levine's book, written in the wake of September 11th, when our nation was at the lowest low we had felt in generations. In it, he traces the history of Jewish messianic thought and its evolution into our present-day Jewish consciousness. Now, let's clear the air for a moment. When I say the word Messiah, what do you think of? What do you feel? We Jews tend to have a visceral reaction to the word Messiah. I've been teaching a monthly Finding God class since I came to Temple Emanu-El. And when I asked them this question, their answers were very telling. First of all, even me asking them this question made them uncomfortable. The term Messiah evokes collective Jewish memories of forced conversions and anti-Semitism, of being accused and maligned. For many of us, Messiah is a Christian belief, and to an extent, at least in this day and age, that's mostly true. But it wasn't always so. The other answer that my Finding God class shared was that for modern rational thinkers, Messiah was a dangerous, wishful thinking, that someone was going to come in and solve all of our problems for us. However, we all agreed that the idea of Messiah, against the backdrop of a society feeling prolonged despair, was an audacious act of hope, one that we admired, even if we didn't share it. For what was the alternative? To accept that our situation is and always will be hopeless? That things could never get better? That we would inevitably continue to spiral in unyielding patterns of human self-destruction? Messiah, as we say in English, comes from the Hebrew word Mashiach, which means anointed one. Originally, Mashiach referred to high priests, emperors, and kings. They were all human beings with nothing supernatural about them. But with time, the term Mashiach began to take on a much more loaded context, one that reflected religious obsession with eschatology, the term for conditions that will lead to the end of the world. Understand that for Jews throughout our long history, Exile and war, return and security had become the norm. Each time that we rebuilt our communities, we hoped that this time things would be different. But eventually, chaos and destruction would follow. This pattern isn't unique to the Jews. Most civilizations that rise will fall. But our response to the pattern became ingrained in our collective Jewish psyche. Rather than view the world nihilistically, viewing everything as meaningless, or that we are being punished by a vengeful God, a messianic theology developed that all of the war and upheaval that we are experiencing were actually the birth pangs of the Messiah, who would lead us not only back to the safety of our land, but would change the nature of reality itself. Yes, the wars and profound uncertainty were happening. No one could deny that. But they were happening for a reason, for a purpose, which meant that even if we didn't like God's plan, at least there was a plan. And we were, in our own passive way, part of it. We see this reflected in the high holiday imagery of the Sefer Chaim, the Book of Life, where our fate and God's will is recorded. But Rosh Hashanah, Yicha Tevun, Uv Yom Tzom Kippur, Yicha Temun. On Rosh Hashanah, this is written. On the fast of Yom Kippur, it's sealed. Who shall live and who shall die? Who by fire and who by water? Who by war and who by beast? I hesitate to reduce 3,000 years of Jewish history into a pattern, but each age of Jewish immigration and accomplishment was cut short by major historical upheavals. The spread of Islam and the Crusades, expulsions, and finally, at the end of the Jewish Renaissance in Spain, came the Spanish Inquisition. Each time tragedy befell us, Jewish fervor increased for the Messiah. When the Jews who fled the Spanish Inquisition found refuge in the Ottoman Empire, a small group of Jewish mystics moved into the mountain city of Sfat. There, with creative courage, they challenged this assumption of a calculating, punishing God in a profound way. Maybe we have it all wrong, they said. Maybe there's not an all-powerful God who's doing this to us. Maybe God is, like us, broken and scattered. Maybe God is, like us, battling forces of chaos and evil. Maybe God is, like us, trying to heal and become whole. They saw the world as broken because God is broken. But rather than despair, the Kabbalists put forth a worldview of Jewish empowerment unlike anything seen before, and leaned on Torah stories, the glue of the Jewish civilization, that put each of us as individuals and we as the Jewish people in partnership with God to tikkun olam, to heal the world, one intentional act at a time. We call these intentional acts, as they are prescribed in our tradition, mitzvot. In this way, the Jews of Sfat posited, just as we need God, God needs us. We're partners in this endeavor. Without us, God would remain limited Without us, the world would remain broken. This theological reframing reclaimed the sacred Brit, our covenant with God, but with an orientation that empowered each of us, that required each of us to actively and intentionally do our part. Then, and only then, would both God and the world become healed and whole. And who would benefit from this redemption? The Jews, of course, but not only the Jews. Everyone. All people. The world. Theirs became, for the first time, a universal messianism. The Kabbalists of Sfat were way less focused on any one individual Messiah, but rather they strove for a messianic age. We Jews, each of us, were the absolute key in creating a just reality conducive for all people to be safe, healthy, and secure. Lo yisogoy al goy charev, velo yimodun od milchama. Nations shall beat their swords into plowshares, and nations shall know war no more. A time when everyone will be able to sit beneath their vine and fig tree in peace and unafraid. Lo b'shamayim hi. It's not something beyond us, they claimed, but rather it's well within our grasp to fully realize our potential as a vital partner with God to fix our broken world. Jewish messianic thought has evolved from a Messiah who will deliver us back to our land to one who will change the reality of the world, to a messianic age where we will each be part of bringing about the conditions that we dream the world could be. However, all of these messianic ideas that we Jews have had have one thing in common: a longing, a desperate yearning. The world is broken, yes. And the Jew at her core, at his core, yearns to fix it, to nourish it, to heal it. The world is a mess, yes. And it's perfectly human to throw up our hands and have doubts about being able to change anything. But the yearning, the longing, the striving to make things better is the core of Judaism and the texture of what it means to be a Jew. Proverbs tells us that when there is no vision, the people perish. Perhaps the idea of a messianic age is less accurate than to say that we're on a messianic journey with no guarantees of success. Our Jewish vision has evolved into directing the very best of who we are towards justice and peace and love. Then will everyone sit beneath their vine and fig tree in peace and unafraid. This is what it could be. This is the vision. But we have to do the work. Modern Reform Judaism has taken this to its logical conclusion. There is no Messiah, we say. At least there's no one person who's going to come and fix everything for us. And you are it. You're the one. and so is the person on either side of you and on either side of them. The one. But we can't wait. You are needed. Far from helpless, Judaism assures us you have the power to love more deeply, to be more compassionate, and to better engage the world around us. That's our charge. That's what we've been telling ourselves for hundreds of generations. This is our mission. I know ours is a demanding tradition. It can feel overwhelming that Judaism asks so much of us. This is what we mean on Rosh HaShanah when we talk about tshuva. It's an acknowledgement that we can become more than we currently are, better than we have been. And this has huge implications for each of us and the world in which we live. That life is about more than just roaming the earth. The years that we have, in the end, come down to meaning. What kind of husband or wife could I be? Sister or brother? Child or grandparent? Citizen of the world? Jew? Congregants at Temple Emanu-El? These questions help us reorient ourselves, return to the vision of how we can do the sacred work of protecting each other and healing our surroundings. As long as we keep our Jewish vision before us and engage in the relationships that allow us to do the work, then we can each see ourselves as being part of the same messianic journey, one that our people have been on since time as we know it began. There is no Messiah, and you are it. Shana Tova.